It's no surprise that unprepared boards don't govern well. And typically, unstructured meetings occur because they start off with a weak agenda. And before we get into our topic, discussing the agenda, which is the first of 5 tools in our series discussing the chairman's toolbox and those tools, we will be talking not only about the agenda, but the board packet, meeting minutes, the use of parliamentary procedure, and finally, action item tracking. Those are the 5 tools that we will discuss. And we're leading off this series with the chair's agenda. But before we go into that topic, I want to welcome you back to Boardroom Minutes. I am your host, Marcus Brantley. Glad you're tuning in because Boardroom Minutes is your premier channel for insights concerning the boardroom, and that's for-profit corporations, nonprofit organizations, and religious institutions like churches. So let's go into our first tool in our series of the Chairman's Toolbox, and that has to do with the agenda. Now, listen, the chairman's role is not just to call the meeting to order. I'm sure that is the typical perspective when individuals look at the chairman's role, but it's more than that because the chairman not only calls the meeting to order, but helps to guide the board's work with structure, clarity, and also discipline. And the agenda is one of the chairman's most important tools. Why? Because it determines what the board will focus on, what decisions need to be made, and how the meeting will be used. Now, not only do I have experience as a former and current board chair, but I'm also a pastor. And I like from time to time to weave in scripture to provide sort of a foundation, because in the Bible, we find a great deal of wisdom. And Solomon wrote in Proverbs 21, verse 5, and this is the NLT translation, that good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. Now, just think of that in the context of your organization, whether it's a nonprofit, not-for-profit organization, like a financial institution, credit unions, or even your religious institution, you're a pastor of a church. It's important that there be good planning and also hard work in the planning that can lead the organization to prosper. And then on the opposite side of that, if you're hasty about it, if you do not have a well-drafted agenda, as well as other components that we'll talk about in this series in the chair's toolbox, then that can lead to the organization's not fulfilling its mission and ultimately it becoming insolvent. We don't want that to occur. So let's continue to talk about the agenda. And the agenda, we know board meetings need planning, just like Solomon encourages us to do. It needs planning. And a strong agenda helps prevent hasty discussion. Also, it prevents scattered decisions as well as it stops and prevents wasting time. And that's the number one killer of a board meeting, and that is wasting time. Does it make sense for a meeting to go into the wee hours of the evening, or if you're scheduled in the afternoon, way past the necessary time that is needed? So the agenda sets the direction of the meeting. It, in essence, tells the board where the meeting is going. It gives it a course outline, where and what should be discussed in the meeting. Because without an agenda, your meetings can become reactive, they can become emotional, and people don't like an unfocused meeting. You need a meeting with structure. Or if you don't have structure, you'll wind up having a meeting that's dominated by whoever on the board speaks the loudest. And you know what I'm talking about if you are a current board member. But a good agenda, it helps the board to stay connected to the mission. Also, the priorities and decisions that actually need the most attention. So, in other words, you prioritize those items that are key, that need time allotted. And we're going to talk about that in a second in order to fully discuss the issues that need decisions made. And that is for the agenda to protect the board's time, because board members who are often volunteers, especially in nonprofits and churches, their time ought to be respected as well. Everyone's time. Why? Because you can't buy back time. Now, yes, you can use tools as leverage to help you buy back time, but typically once you spend time, you can't get it back. So you want to respect the time of your fellow colleagues. And a well-planned agenda helps prevent long meetings, especially those long meetings that accomplish very little. A well-crafted agenda, it creates order and helps the chair moves meetings forward without rushing those matters that are of utmost importance. That's why it's important for there to be those items at the top of the agenda that are key and where decisions that impact the mission need to be discussed thoroughly. So the agenda also clarifies what requires action, because everything doesn't require action. Everything doesn't require emotion. Everything doesn't require a decision. It may be just something discussed to give the board a heads up as to an issue that may surface, that may arise in the future, and that should be on the radar of the board. Not everything on the agenda should be treated the same. Some items are just for information, some are for discussion, and some are for decisions. Now, some of those decisions require follow-up, and a strong agenda helps the board knows when it is listening, when it's deliberating, and when it is voting. Finally, the agenda, or next to last, the agenda helps prevent mission drift. Now, for church and nonprofit boards, you can easily get pulled into side issues, but a good chair uses the agenda to keep the board focused on governance, not gossip, not hearsay, but strategy, not confusion, but stewardship. No distractions. And the agenda should help the board ask, does this issue belong before the board? And does it help advance the mission? Because if the answer is no, then it shouldn't be on your agenda. Now, the agenda also supports better meeting minutes. Now, in this series, we will be talking about the meeting minutes, and having a well-crafted agenda supports having a well-drafted board meeting minutes. So when agenda items are clear, then you have an outline for the secretary who is responsible for the minutes that can better record the motions that are on each agenda item, and also the assignments and the follow-up of particular items. And that's connected to what we're going to talk about last in our series, which is the action item tracking. So by having it on the agenda, the secretary can refer to it and then be able to indicate in the minutes the follow-up items. So if the agenda, though, is vague, then the minutes will more than likely be vague as well. because the agenda provides the framework, it provides the structure. The last thing you want to do is, and these are common mistakes when it comes to the agenda and why boards are not effective at meetings, and that's when the agenda is sent too late. You should not be getting an agenda at the start of your board meeting. Your agenda should be part of your board packet, and you should know ahead of time what are the key issues and the decisions that need to be made so that you're well informed ahead of time and be able to discuss those key issues. Then your agenda should not allow unrelated issues to take over. Remember, that should be at the bottom of the agenda, if at all. And the priority matters should be at the top. You also don't want your agenda to fail to identify decision-making items. Those are the items of priority. And then you want to make sure that your agenda ends the meeting with clear assignments and the next steps. That's key. So, in closing, what is a practical tip for chairs is that before the meeting, the chair should ask in the agenda, what must the board know? This is how you craft your agenda. What must the board discuss? Also, what must the board decide? And what must be assigned after the decisions are made? That simple framework can make the agenda stronger, and it can make your board much more effective. The agenda is much more than just paperwork. It's a leadership tool, which is part of the chair's toolbox. A strong agenda helps the chairman guide the meeting with order, and it protects the board's mission and time. It strengthens decision making, and it keeps everybody on course. So we're going to end with a board that meets without a clear agenda may still talk, but it may not govern well at all. So we're going to end it right there. This is Marques Brantley, your host of Boardroom Minutes. And if you're not a subscriber yet, why don't you hit the subscribe button? And if you felt this was beneficial to you, this episode on the agenda, why don't you like it as well? This is Marques Brantley, your host of Boardroom Minutes, your premier channel for clear, concise insights into the issues that shape today's boardrooms, namely for-profit corporations, nonprofit organizations, and religious institutions. Hopefully, we'll see you on next week. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.